Welcome to Oyate Today. Oyate in Lakota means people. Oyate Today is sponsored by Security First Bank, your financial partner since 1898. Security First Bank, a relationship you can count on. Member FDIC. Hi, welcome to Oyate Today. I am your host, Richie Richards. Oyate Today is produced by Tim and Jackie Gallego. Tim is an enrolled member of the Oglala Sioux tribe. Our guest tonight is Kooper Caraway, president of the Sioux Falls AFL-CIO. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you for having me, Richie.
This is going to be an awesome discussion, President Caraway, so I'm really glad you're here. So
I'm happy to be here.
And you traveled from Sioux Falls to get here this morning to be on our show tonight, so thank you.
That's right. It's more than worth it.
Yeah. Good deal, sir. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Kooper, and kind of what led up to your presidency as there in Sioux Falls.
Sure. Well, my mother is Kiowa Plains Apache, and my father is white. He comes from his great-grandparents are German immigrants, but both working class. We weren't wealthy. Most of our life we traveled around looking for work. I've lived in Alabama, South Carolina, Texas, all over the place, like many working class families do. They travel around to wherever the work is. And I saw my parents and other people in my situation working very hard, working very long hours, but still sometimes we didn't have food. Still sometimes we had trouble paying bills. Still sometimes we didn't have water. And that ran contrary to what I was told. We're all told that here in this country, if you work hard enough, you'll succeed. If you work hard enough, you won't have to worry about bills or food or the basics. And I saw early on that wasn't true. That many times people can work very hard and still not have enough to eat and not have enough to make ends meet. So that's what really brought me in to the labor movement, because I saw that an individual can work very hard. An individual can work very long hours, but they still may not succeed. But when folks come together collectively in a community, in a union, then that's when we start to succeed. When regular people come together and work together towards a common goal, that's when they succeed. And so I wanted to be part of that and help bring that to the working people all across the country.
And so could you explain to us what the AFL-CIO is? What are those, well, first of all, what do the letters stand for, and what is it exactly for our members, our audience who is not aware of what that is?
Sure. So the AFL stands for the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations. So it is a federation of labor unions. And so the electrical workers, the public workers, teachers, all kinds of unions have come together to be part of the AFL-CIO. And so in Sioux Falls, we have 32 different unions, from bricklayers, postal workers, letter carriers, all kinds, meat packing plant workers from the UFCW. We have all kinds of unions who come together and are part of the AFL-CIO because they understand that working together, when different unions in different sectors work together, then we can achieve much more.
Okay, and so what are those goals that they're communally trying to achieve then?
So what we want to do is we want to make sure that everybody has a job. We want to make sure that every single person has a job, and that at that job they're treated with respect, and that they're provided the benefits they need for them and their family. When the labor movement first started, workers united around a simple ask, and the ask was that they should only work 8 hours a day. Because before that, men, women, and children were working 20, 22 hours a day with little time to rest. And so workers came together and said, we want 8 hours to work, 8 hours to sleep, and 8 hours to do what we want. 8, 8, and 8. And they came together around a simple demand. And that's how the labor movement started. Today, the labor movement continues that tradition by saying all workers deserve a job, and you deserve respect, good pay, and benefits at that job. You shouldn't be overworked. You shouldn't have to choose between raising your family, spending time with your family, or feeding your family. You should be able to do both in the most wealthy country the world has ever seen. Nobody should work 40 hours a day and have trouble paying their bills.
Sure. Now, Mr. Caraway, you're the youngest president of the AFL-CIO across the nation for this particular group in Sioux Falls, correct?
Actually,
Okay.
when I was elected, I was the youngest. A few weeks after I was elected, a young brother from Wisconsin who got elected. He was 26.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm the second youngest now. But I think it's good that we're seeing this more and more and more young folks taking leadership positions and getting involved in the labor movement and in the political arena as well.
Why is it important for youth to be involved in this then? Why is it important for a younger generation to be involved in this? Because earlier you had mentioned that the AFL-CIO, the labor unions are run by much older men, mostly, women included, but I mean, older generation people are at these presidencies, running these unions and things like that. Why is it important for youth to be involved in these?
So youth are the future, to be honest with you. And so what we're seeing is a large influx in young people joining labor unions. And so there was recently a poll conducted of union approval across the nation. 61% of all people polled said they approved of labor unions. 48% said that if given the opportunity, they would join or form a union. But when the age is brought down, so when they look at people under 35, the 75% of people under 35 approve of labor unions. Last year was the first year in decades that the labor movement had a net growth, had net gain. Over 250,000 people joined labor unions last year, and a majority of those were under 35. And so many more young people are getting involved, many more young people are taking ownership in their workplace, and I think that's important. It's important for young people to get involved in all aspects of this country, and they need a seat at the table.
And so when did you become president then?
I was elected January of this year.
This year, 2018?
Yes.
Wow. And so were there any challenges coming up into wanting to be, I guess, are you nominated then, or do you just throw your name in the hat, or how does that work to become president?
Yeah, so you have to be nominated, you have to be elected. I always say the labor movement and a union is the most democratic institution in this country because everyone gets an equal vote. Everyone gets an equal share. No matter your age, you're under 18, if you're part of a labor union, you get to vote the same as everybody else. If you're documented or undocumented, if you're a worker, you can be in a union and you can vote in that union. And so it doesn't matter how much money you have. Everyone's vote is counted equally. And so our union is a democracy, our organization is a democracy, and it's far more democratic than a lot of political things.
Okay. And so as far as president of the AFL-CIO in Sioux Falls, what is a large part of your task? Like, what is your day-to-day business? What goals do you accomplish throughout your work week or day-to-day, I guess?
Sure. So it's twofold. Number one, we have to ensure that we protect the rights that we've already fought for and won. So we have to protect workers in their workplace. We have to make sure they're being treated with respect, and we have to make sure that management is doing the things they're supposed to be doing, that they're not harassing or exploiting workers that are already organized. And two, we have to be in the community organizing workers who don't have a union, helping workers who are being exploited, helping workers who are being taken advantage of, helping them form a union so that they have power in their workplace.
Sure. Is there exploitation going on in Sioux Falls?
There's exploitation all over this country. Sioux Falls, Rapid City, they're not exempt. There's exploitation all over the place. Many times folks are hired, they're being lied to when they're hired, they're told they're being brought on for a full-time position. 3-4 months later they find out they were only hired for a seasonal position and then they're laid off. Or there's a workplace where women are paid less than men for doing the same position in the same hours, the same work, but they're being paid less than men. Or you have workers of color who are being paid less for doing the same work as their white counterparts. Or you have big corporations like Walmart who hire workers, bring them in and say they're full-time, but keep them at 39 hours so they don't have to give them the 40-hour benefits. So you have worker exploitation at a large scale all across the state.
Sure, sure. President Caraway, we're going to take a break, but when we get back, we'll learn a little bit more about labor unions here in Rapid City, and we'll talk a little bit more about your work. So we'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
You can't predict life's ups and downs. You just give it all you've got to stay on top. But it's easier with a partner like Security First Bank. Since 1898, we've been riding with you through the country's biggest ups and downs. And this is where we'll stay. Security First Bank, a relationship you can count on. Member FDIC.
Nia na mie, ehash unkichi trokechashni. Wiki ampete yuchla hinapcha, chawamblakesa. Nish wiki walaka cha, hechutu wajicha. Mitakuye oyasi.
Our school has great students and dedicated teachers, but we need our community volunteers to help us to provide a broader view of the many ways a good education can point to a bright future.
Did someone say volunteer? Our team at Black Hills is here to help. In fact, we sponsor events and projects, and our employees volunteer for organizations throughout the Black Hills, including partnering with schools to help students learn more about life outside the classroom. Extracurricular, extra fun.
Native Sun News has been voted the best weekly newspaper in its class for 2015 by the South Dakota and North Dakota Newspaper Associations. You can find a copy of the Native Sun News at many businesses and vending machines in Rapid City and the surrounding area, and on all 9 reservations. We publish every Wednesday, so advertisers and subscribers can reach our diverse readership by calling 605-721-1266. The Native Sun News covers the other side of the story.
Hi, welcome back to Oyate Today. Once again, our guest tonight is President Kooper Caraway of the AFL-CIO in Sioux Falls. Thank you so much for being on our show tonight, sir.
Thank you for having me.
And definitely thank you for coming out and visiting us in Rapid City, so thank you. Before the break, we were talking about the AFL-CIO's work in the community and in the state and across the nation. But locally in South Dakota, how many members do we have involved in that program?
So as far as AFL-affiliated unions, there's about 7,000 union members across the state. And as far as other unions total, there's about 20,000 union members across the state.
And what is the benefit? I mean, how does that work to become a member then? Is there fees paid? Is there sign-ups? I mean, I'm not familiar with that, so.
Sure, so to form a union in your workplace is a pretty simple task. Number one, what you have to do is find a group of workers that feel the same way you do. If you feel like you need to be paid more, if you feel like you need more benefits, or if you just feel like you need a little more respect, you need to be treated a little bit better in the workplace. You just need to find a few of your coworkers that feel the same way you do. And then once you do that, once you have 3 or 4 coworkers, depending on the size of your workplace, you have what we call an organizing committee, all right? And then that committee's job is to then talk to the rest of your coworkers, find out what's important to them, find out what changes they'd like to see made, right? And then once you have a majority of folks in your workplace who want a union, who want more power, who want more authority in the workplace, who are tired of this managerial dictatorship that whatever the boss says goes. When you have a majority of folks who are tired of that, they sign cards saying they want to have an election, and they send those cards to the National Labor Relations Board in Minneapolis. And then the National Labor Relations Board will then come down to your workplace and conduct an election. And your boss, no matter how your boss feels about the whole process, your boss has to honor the results of that election. And so on election day, you and your coworkers will show up and you'll have 2 options, union yes or union no. If the majority of you and your coworkers vote union yes, then you have a union. And your boss is legally obligated to sit down at the table with you and your coworkers and negotiate every single condition of your employment. Negotiate wages, negotiate hiring practices, negotiate benefits, negotiate situations in which you can be hired or fired or disciplined. They have to negotiate every single thing. So maybe when you were first hired, before you had a union, your boss came in and slapped a policy manual down on the table and said, these are the rules. Remember them, you have to follow them. And I can change them at any time whenever I feel like it. But now that policy manual gets thrown out the window. Now you and your coworkers are sitting down with your boss and writing a new policy manual, and we call that a collective bargaining agreement.
And so what is I mean, it seems like a lot of these business leaders, a lot of these business managers, a lot of these owners of these companies are really benefiting from having business and having access to, well, impoverished community members, Native American members, African American members, and other members. So it really seems like they have the upper hand in a lot of this. And so the unions, and forming the unions, especially in a place like Rapid City in the Black Hills area, because so much of our work is tourism-based, seasonal, and things like that. So locally, you know, I could see the benefit of that being the case for a lot of people who are only hired for 4 or 5 months out of the year and let go. And not only that, but their hours are dwindling as the season is closing, and they're losing their, I guess, power as an employee. Then is that?
That's right. See, what I say is that in South Dakota, if you work for a living, if you have a boss in South Dakota, no matter how good you think your wages are, how good your benefits are, you need a union. Because in South Dakota, if you don't have a union, then you're an at-will employee. That means that if your manager gets up and steps on his kid's Lego that morning and is in just a really bad mood, when he gets to work, he can fire you. He can fire everybody. And there's nothing you can do about it. There's no state law against it. There's no protection there unless you have a union. If you have a union, he can't fire you for any reason. He can't discipline you for every reason. He has to go through the union. He has to go through several layers, several steps before they can even discipline you. And so that's the only protection that the workers and the people in South Dakota have, is with a union. Otherwise, the state provides no protection for working people. The state provides all the protection for business owners, but none of it for working people. And so that's why working folks have to stick together and organize together. And that's all the labor movement is.
So as a president then, as the president of the AFL-CIO in Sioux Falls, you get a complaint that comes in, or a series of complaints that comes in, let's say from Mitchell, South Dakota, or Yankton, South Dakota, or whatever the case may be, that there's a commonality of events that's taking place at a work site, right? What is your job to do then to help those employees?
So my job is to coordinate with the unions on the ground in that area. So there are unions all over South Dakota. We have unions in Mitchell, we have unions in Rapid City, we have unions in Aberdeen, we have unions in Redfield, and we have unions in DeSmet. There's unions all over the place, big and small. And so my job is to coordinate with the unions on the ground there, coordinate with our state labor federation, coordinate with the national AFL-CIO, and pool all of our resources together to make sure that the harmful practices being done at that workplace, whatever they may be, are stopped.
What are some of the trends that you see then? What are some of the major complaints or major issues that are happening, not only in Sioux Falls, but let's say in South Dakota?
Sure, so a major issue I'll use Rapid City as an example.
Sure.
So a major issue in Rapid City is that folks are being hired as I said, folks are being hired for full-time positions, but then later they find out that they were seasonal staff and they're let go after 3 or 4 months. Or Native people are brought on and hired, and they're being paid less than their white counterparts for the same work. So that's a problem. There's also a problem with wage theft. What I mean by wage theft is that maybe you have young Native workers that are working as day laborers. So they're brought in to work at a cleanup job, construction job, something like that, and they're told they'll be paid cash at the end of the day. The end of the day comes and they're not paid nothing. And so those are big problems. And those are problems that individually are very hard to fix. If something happens like that, individually on your own, the best thing you can do is call a lawyer. But most folks don't have the funds to pay for a lawyer. And so the other option is to come together and organize together with other people who are facing the same issues and forming a union. And that's how you put a stop to those things.
Sure, sure. So can hotel and restaurant workers here in Rapid City form a union then?
Yes, and they should. Anyone can form a union. Every worker has the right to form a union under the National Labor Relations Act. It's federal law. Every worker has the right to form a union. And as I said, forming a union is a fairly simple legal practice. And I think that especially hotel workers, restaurant workers, the hotel and restaurant worker union is called Unite Here. Right? That's the name of the union.
Okay.
And they're very strong all across the country. They don't have any locals here yet, but they're very strong across the country. And they're on the forefront of a lot of struggles. So one thing a union does is, number one, it turns what was previously seen as a job, it turns it into a career. All of a sudden, no matter what kind of job you have, your job becomes a career because you have good pay, good benefits. You look at a manager at Walmart might make $12, $13 an hour, but I can point to a union custodian, a union janitor that starts off at $15 an hour because they have a union. On top of that, Unite Here is at the forefront of the struggle against sex trafficking, human trafficking.
Sure.
Those types of things that happen so often in the hotel and restaurant industries. The unions are at the forefront because while these managers of these resorts and these hotels, oftentimes they take classes on how to prevent human trafficking, they take classes on how to identify these different practices, maybe they're tired. Maybe they miss something, or maybe they sweep it under the rug. But when the workers have the power in the workplace, when the workers have the power to identify these things and put a stop to them, then we've seen it's much more effective when all the workers are involved to stop human trafficking rather than when just the managers are involved.
Sure.
And so there's a whole lot of benefits to organizing a union for hotel and restaurant workers especially.
Sure. President Caraway, we're going to talk or take a break, but when we get back, let's talk a little bit about the resistance against the unions here in South Dakota and in Sioux Falls, possibly Rapid City, okay? We'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
If youth and family services weren't available in this community, there would be a lot of unmet basic needs. Very few organizations do as good a job as youth and family services, getting every ounce of usefulness out of people's time, their dollars that they donate.
Youth and family services help so many kids. It's a great value to the community.
Join me because together we help kids.
I used to think news is news. It's all the same, but it's not. There's a big difference between local broadcast news and cable news. See, local stations are part of my community, connecting me to local news, weather, and sports on every device. It makes sense. Get the news from the people I trust who actually live here. No agenda, no bias like on cable shout shows or social media, just facts. For news I can trust, I stay local. Support your local stations. Text TV to 52886 today.
Thank you.
Kindness. Pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Hi, welcome back to Oyate Today. Once again, our guest tonight is President Kooper Caraway of the AFL-CIO in Sioux Falls. Thank you so much for being here again, sir. Now, before the break, we were talking about the importance of the unions, and so if you could just talk to me in the sense of why the labor union is important for Indian country specifically.
Okay, there's a few reasons. Number one, the labor movement is not funded by big corporations or governments. A lot of charities, nonprofits, non-government NGOs that go in and try to help Indian country, they're relying on funds from big corporations. They're relying on funds from governments, state or federal governments, and that's how they conduct their work. And so oftentimes there becomes a conflict of interest because oftentimes what's best for Indian country, what's best for Native people is not necessarily what's best for their donors, right? For big corporations or for governments. And so the labor movement is not funded by big corporations. We're not funded by any government. We are self-funded. every single one of our 13 million members across the country, every single one donates a little bit of money every month. They contribute a little bit of money called union dues. The union dues come from members, regular working people, and that's the money we use to help establish our programs, to help fight for workers, to help fight for the people all across the country. So we don't answer to corporations. We don't answer to governments. The only people we answer to are the people, to working class people. And so that's a benefit. Number two, the issues that are facing working people are only expanded when you look at Indian country. So when you go off the res or when you leave Indian country, workers surely are being exploited and taken advantage of. But once you get into Indian country, or once you get into cities like Rapid City that have a large Native population and a growing Native population, those issues are multiplied, 2 or 3 times. And so the only movement that has been able to stop sexism and racism and other issues like that inside the workplace is the labor movement. And we're an organization, or a democratic organization, that gives power to the rank and file. Native people are not answering to some white person in Washington, D.C. They're not answering to anybody else. Native people will have their own leadership within the labor movement.
What is the benefit of a business owner or a business manager resisting this type of movement? What is the benefit for them to resist a labor union or a union within their, workspace?
Sure. So oftentimes bosses do resist organizing efforts within their workplace because they don't want to share the power and they don't want to share the wealth. So when a union gets in, they say, well, okay, obviously we want to be treated with respect. We want to be treated equally. We want to have a say in the operations of the business. We want to be part of it. Look throughout history, any time the people have said that they want to say in a government, when a government is run by a dictator, the dictator is going to resist it. Now, across this country, we talk about how much we love democracy, but so many people accept a dictatorship when they show up to work. They do whatever the boss says and they accept it, and then they go home. So what we say is that your love for democracy, the love for democracy you've been taught since you were a child, should translate to the workplace. You shouldn't leave democracy at the door of your workplace. You should bring it with you. And workers should be involved in the decision-making process and should have a share of the profits that they're generating.
Sure. And just with a one-word answer, should employees here in Rapid City come together and form a union?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you, President Caraway, for being here tonight, and thank you for making the trip from Sioux Falls to be on our show tonight. I want to thank our producers, I want to thank our sponsors, and I want to thank you for making Oyate today. And one last note, October 22nd is the deadline to register to vote. You've been watching Oyate Today, brought to you by Security First Bank.